Dag sy maak as jy reg vir dag 1?
Ja.
Of is hierdie nou dag 2?
Locked and loaded, ready to go, boys.
So getting up the next morning at the start of day 2 with the same train on that had been waking all of us up the previous night as well, we started to slowly but surely crawl out of our tents and started getting ready for the beginning of the second day of the GS Trophy. We immediately started by checking JP's brake lever, seeing if it would be fine to still compete in the second day, and luckily it was still in working condition. Next up, we also checked our tire pressures, scared that they would come around checking if our tires were all above 2 bar. Luckily my front tire wasn't losing any air as I was scared it might, and it was still above 2 bar, so we were good to go. The bikes were all lined up and we were pretty ready for the second day to finally start. So out of all 30 riders, there were 28 1200s and only 2 800s. So exercise 2 was walk the bike. Now walk the bike is something we've already done at the regional qualifier and also been training a lot. At nationals, walking the bike would consist of the following. You would have to lay your bike down on one side, pick it up, drop it to the other side, then pick it up again, drop it back to the first side it was on, and then finally pick it up for a third and final time. After that, you had to walk the bike, which is holding on to it with one hand and one hand only. The second you touch it with another hand, you would be losing points. So touching it with your second hand would count as a border, meaning that your overall time gets multiplied by 2. After walking around your bike 3 times, you had to kick out your side stand and let go of the bike. Only then the timer was stopped. Now the highlight at exercise 2 was Dalton the Brain. So he's the same free state competitor that we had met the previous day. Just notice in this clip how effortlessly he picks up the bike twice and then continues to walk around it at lightning speed. The free state team were doing a very good job at this very first exercise, and the Northwest team, us, were taking a good look at what we could learn from them. And pretty soon afterwards, we were up. I opted to rather jump over my motorcycle instead of running around it. I knew that I would be losing time at this very first exercise. Now all of the exercises will be forming the same structure. So let's say you finish your exercise in 1 minute. If you have 1 dab, it gets multiplied by 2, meaning you then have 2 minutes. If you hit 1 border, it gets multiplied by 3, meaning you then have 3 minutes. And if you drop your motorcycle, it gets multiplied by 4, meaning you then have 4 minutes. So you want to try and rather do the exercises slowly and make no mistakes, like no dabs, no borders or no drops. So I would rather take my time walking around my motorcycle really slowly instead of dropping it, thus getting my time multiplied by 4. And finally, like that, we were finished with the very first exercise. It's quite scary when you realize how fast your heart's beating, even though you're doing something while standing still. Next up, we head over to the BlackBox. Now this is a form of the garage, or Latte, as we call it in South Africa. So it's a basic course where your dexterity and agility on the motorcycle gets tested. How well your balance is and how quickly you can turn and maneuver. There were 2 tricky spots on this track. The first one being an uphill sharp turn to the left. And the second one also being a sharp uphill turn to the right. The photos that were being taken at the event just looked so awesome. Thank you so much. And finally, Team Northwest was up. I was going to be going first. At this stage in the competition, my nerves were absolutely killing me, and I was feeling a bit of pressure, I have to admit. And around my very first turn, this one here, I screwed up. I hit the border, thus giving me ×3, and also giving away a dab, so that meant another ×2. So I already lost a couple of points, but luckily I felt like now I had made my first mistake, so finally I could just relax and focus on enjoying the competition. Now from here on out, I'll be including all the exercises and the races that we are doing. This is just so that if there are any people interested in watching the whole thing or trying to show someone else where they messed up, I just like to include everything. But if you don't want to watch the whole exercise, just feel free to skip to the next timestamp. And with exercise 3 out of the way, with a small error that I wasn't very happy with, it was finally time to check out my teammates. Mark had an awesome pass. Well done. Next up, exercise 4 was a sleeper balancing exercise. There would be 2 or 3 sleepers on which you had to ride. The second your front or back wheel hopped off of the sleeper, it would count as a border, meaning times 3. Dab is always times 2 and a drop times 3. Balancing on these sleepers aren't always the easiest thing to do, but it's something you obviously can't just quickly undo. If you had to turn around and go and do it again, they would count another border if you messed it up again, so it was better to just keep going. There were 3 more sleepers, and then there were 2 square boxes. Now in these boxes, you had to do 2 circles, one clockwise and one anti-clockwise. Now you had to try and knock over as many of the 4 cones inside of it as possible. But it was placed in such a strategic position that if you got greedy and tried to go for all 4 of them, you might drop your bike. So most of the riders only went for 3 of them. I decided to strategically, on the 800, just make sure that I got 2 of them, thus doing not too poorly, and make up my lost time in the following exercises, where the 800 would be carrying an advantage. This is from Jan's dog, Tolstoy, most likely in reference to Leo Tolstoy, who was a Russian writer born in 1828. He was mostly known for his work in War and Peace. The exercise following the sleeper balance was the wheel swap. So each team were given 2 state-of-the-art 1250s. These bikes were the bikes we would be competing with in Albania. Now the goal of this exercise was to swap both the front wheels and also swap both the back wheels. There was also a separate wheel, a straightforward rim with a tie on it. So all 3 team members had to swap both the front wheels both the back wheels and also take the tire off of the rim and also put it back on. We quickly decided that Mark and JP, being on 1200s and more accustomed to the tools that they would be using, would start by switching the front wheels and the back wheels, and I would be on rim duty. Now we also came up with a pretty good strategy. While I was changing the tire off of my rim, JP would be loosening both calipers bolts on the bikes and also the pinch bolts, and Mark would be loosening the back tires. The back tires were the easiest ones to switch as nobody had to hold up the bike. By the time both the back wheels were finished, I would then be finished with my tire, thus being able to hold down one of the bikes while JP holds down the other one, and then Mark just quickly swaps out the front tires. I also grabbed a couple of pretty good tips right before this exercise from Wim Tyrell. Tricks to try and get this tire off of the rim faster. Thank you so much, Wim Tyrell. And yeah, as you can see, by now the rim was a bit bent, and putting this tire back on and taking it off happened pretty quickly.
Hoe doen jullie het twee? Is jullie amper reg vir my?
I was finished with my job a bit too quick, and both JP and Mark were still busy swapping the back wheels of the motorcycles.
Right. Hoor jy ek sê so? Dis alles los al twee kante voor. Alles is los hier. Okay.
And with all the bolts already being taken out on the front wheels, there was nothing for me to do, so we were losing a bit of time. I was for the most of it just putting in the bolts so that Mark then could quickly tighten them. Moving over to JP, he was having a bit of trouble aligning the bolts alone, so I quickly jumped in and helped him that side. And not before long we had it lined up and we started bolting this back wheel on.
Ja, ja, ik zal amper klaar. Is hy klaar? Is er nog nie los nie, met ons.
We then realized a small error. All of the front bolts had not been taken out yet, so we had to quickly take out both of our pinch bolts and also the caliper bolts, and then swap the front wheels. And finally, at long last, JP and I could weigh down the back of the bikes so that Mark could finally swap out the front wheels.
Lekker JP, hoe gaan het? Rustig, ik zag al doors. Kom ze Latte vir Black Label.
And once both the front wheels had been swapped, we finally got to tightening down the pinch bolts and the caliper bolts. Now I realize here that we were tightening the pinch bolts before the axle was already tightened, but luckily the motorcycle was only going to be riding to the destination. We would be fixing it later. This was only due to a lack of tools and us being on a time restriction. And not before long, we were at the final stretch. We had to put all of our tools back on the carpet, we had found them, and Mark was already busy returning the motorcycle after riding it to the destination. We only had to put it on a center stand and we were done. And while some of the riders were really stressed and giving it their all, some of them were just having a good time. Now next up, we did an obstacle course. This was an obstacle course filled with most of the exercises that we had trained up until now. These were also the exercises that determined the regional qualifier winners. So basically this was a combination of everything we had done up until now. A lot of these exercises we were training in the training series as well. It started off with a simple log grind, a quick back turn into a small trench. After that you had to do one single turn to the right around a big stump and then jump over a log. After this log you then went all the way around a tree, and then next up there was a neck brace on a cone. Now the goal was to pick up the neck brace with your right hand and then put it on top of a different cone, all the while not touching the ground. Pretty soon all of us were seeing how the other riders were doing it. They were picking up the neck brace with their right hand and then stopping against the fallen tree with their bark buster without touching the ground, and then just slowly but surely putting the neck brace over the cone without losing your balance. The trick was just to remember to always stand on your back brake so that your bike doesn't roll. Then it was a straightforward parallel logs followed by the seesaw. A straightforward course. And pretty soon I was up. I made sure to enter my log grind at a 45-degree angle and kept my eyes at the end of the log. Afterwards, as I said, you had to do a quick 180-degree turn and then into a small trench, nothing too difficult. Next up came the small turn around the tree stump. Now the tricky part here was that you were allowed to touch anything that was not the ground. It would not count as a dab. So most riders were putting their feet on the logs. I just didn't manage to get my turn and I had to give away one dab there. I wasn't too happy about it, but I kept going. Jumping over the log was quite easy and around the tree, and then next up came the neck brace. Approaching it nice and slowly, I grabbed the neck brace and I approached to where I was going to be placing it. I hooked it around my shoulder, came in nice and slowly, and remembering to step on my back brake, I leaned against the fallen tree and I had a quick chat with Fritz.
Altyd lekker om hier te wees. Ek stem saam.
Afterwards, the final two things were left. I only had to do the parallel logs and then the seesaw. Although I went ahead and I screwed up my parallel logs. This absolutely infuriated me, as it's also something we'd been training a lot, and I realized now that consistency was probably the key, but at this point I was just being consistently shit, so it wasn't the best scenario to be in. But afterwards I finished up this course, quickly did the seesaw, and I was starting to struggle a bit to just stay calm and focus. My emotions were starting to get to me. But nonetheless, a lot of the riders had epic moments here. Well done everyone. It's really cool to see so many riders come together. And Tolstoy once again makes another appearance. Next up we did the official garage. This was, as they call in South Africa, the Latte. So here the main thing that you need to be able to do is have slow balance on the motorcycle and be able to do lock turns at a really advanced level. So balance on the motorcycle here was key. JP from Team Northwest was having an awesome go at this. You could really see that all the training that we had done over the weekend, that it was really paying off. Well done JP. Mark from Northwest was up next, and although he had to give out 1 or 2 dabs, he also had a really good run. Tannie Christel, one of the lady riders, did an excellent job here at the Latte, showing especially me how to do them the right way. Next up, Darrell went, and he even had some time to talk to the crowd. It was awesome to see that some of the riders had such high spirits. And next up, it was my turn. Now starting off, it didn't go too bad. This was after all something we had practiced so much, but I honestly have no idea what happened next. It had been the second time today that once I realized I wasn't going to be making the turn, I then gave more throttle. I have no idea why I'm doing this, but this was the exact same thing that happened at the previous log. Once I saw that my turn wasn't going to cut it, I just opened up on the throttle. But if anybody's ever ridden Latte, you'll know that once you screw up one of your turns, the rest are all ruined. And I completely messed up the ending of this course, and at this point I was really starting to get cross with myself, coming all this way and just coming and messing it up here. But luckily after that I snapped out of it, and I just tried riding the motorcycle and not overthinking things too much. So my next couple of turns came out not too bad, and I finished the track, but I was really disappointed in my performance. It was just sad to see that all that time that I had been training was wasted. But it was, yeah, a fun experience, I guess. You have to learn something out of it. And you can see as I'm crossing over the finish line, I'm just shaking my head. Trust me, this pains me as much to watch as it pains you. But next up, we did the bike lift over the log. This was luckily another team exercise that we would be doing. It was exactly the way we trained it. You had to lift your motorcycle over this stump. So yeah, it's a bit big. We immediately had some discussions, and luckily for the first time in the competition, the 800 would be having an advantage. But it came up that we weren't allowed to pick up the 800s over this log, and it was only strictly for 1200s. But nonetheless, we took JP's bike. Now after picking up the motorcycle over the log, you had to do a running start. So the marshals had duct taped bottle caps over the start button just to make sure no riders were cheating. We got the motorcycle over the log at a decent pace. It wasn't that slow, and the motorcycle was a bit heavy. Lifting it up here at the back, you can hear me groaning as it goes over. And afterwards we got information exactly the way we had trained. JP was on the motorcycle and Mark and I would be running. We got the motorcycle up to speed pretty quick, as the hill was quite steep downwards, and after we bounced we tried twice to get it started, but we couldn't get it going for some reason, and we decided immediately that we had to go back instead of trying any more times. So how it had worked was we had to take the motorcycle around the barrel, and then in the scenario of a team getting the motorcycle started, all three riders had to ride on the motorcycle back. We unfortunately did not get this, so we had to push the bike up the hill, and as you can see, it was not fun. We eventually got to the top. I'll cut the 20 minutes of us pushing that motorcycle up the hill. Mark was also not very happy about the whole exercise. I'll show you in a second. And all I could do was just look at him. Shame. And yeah, while we were running, the other teams had the time of their lives riding the motorcycle back up the hill. All three of them on the bike. There were a couple of funny situations here as well. Next up, we could finally have some time for ourselves. I quickly rushed to the showers in time to grab one of them, and the donkey really did a good job at heating up the water nicely. This was probably the best shower I'd had in quite a while. So we were finally done for the day's exercises, and we got to eat dinner, which was yet again an amazingly well put together 3-course meal. Thank you so much. Wow, the food was so good. And yeah, after the food we yet again had a small debriefing, and we were notified that following on the next day some of the competitors were going to be eliminated, meaning that not all of us could continue riding. This really made me quite sad, as I realized that I had messed up so many times today that this might lead to me not being able to compete, and we had come all this way to ride motorcycle. But it makes sense to try and pick the best team possible, so it was understood. We also had a little bit of fun that when Jan introduced us all to a small game where we had to spin in circles and then run and kick cones. But of course, after all the spinning, your head gets quite dizzy. So we had lots of laughs. And finally, after a long day of serious racing and riding and so many highs and lows throughout them all, it was finally time to hit the hay. And we had heard stories about a previous year one of the riders had slept in his bike kit, and after what had happened the previous night, it made sense to try it. This wasn't my first time sleeping in my kit either, so I didn't mind that much. And as you can probably guess, we were woken up at 3 AM that morning. We would be doing 2 more exercises and then going back to bed. Now for 30 riders to do 2 exercises takes quite a while, and we all realized that we were going to be receiving very little sleep this night, but I mean, it is the trophy after all.
Lekker.
We got a small glimpse at the first exercise, and we immediately recognized it as the wheat grinder, the same variant where we had to tie the rope around a pole. This was the one exercise I had not liked that much at the regional qualifier, to be honest, because I feel like the 800s really stall quite easily. But I was hungry for the challenge and I leapt in immediately and started. So at first, after picking up the pole, you want to keep your eyes at the stationary point of the pole. This way your balance on the motorcycle is a lot better. Immediately I started taking my turn a bit too wide, but luckily in time I put down my foot and recouped and started again. But next up, the thing that I was worried about happened and my motorcycle stalled.
Ja, Achie. Hy gaan sukkel. Ek gaan net weer vrek.
Luckily, Stefan quickly jumped in and held the pole, one of the marshals, as I just restarted my motorcycle and kept going. The next 2 circles went by quite quickly, and then all that was left was putting the pole back down. Now, I have no idea what happened, but I guess as I put down the pole, I put it on top of the peg and it somehow bounced off, and I was not happy about this. I was seriously trying to stay calm, but at this point I just screwed up so many of these exercises and I realized that the chances of me competing the following day was growing pretty slim. Nonetheless, a lot of the riders had an awesome time and they were doing so well. And the next exercise for tonight would be donuts, exercise 11. And of course I dropped my motorcycle again. I got up and in my second go I luckily did about 1 circle, but then I just dropped my motorcycle again. I was starting to get really angry at myself. And I'm guessing from that first drop you can hear my throttle going crazy. My bulkbuster, the same as on my training weekend, bent into my throttle, meaning it now acted as a permanent cruise control. There was although nothing that I could do about it right now, but at this point I just messed up so many exercises and I realized that I would not be able to continue the following morning. And I mean, this was something that we had trained a lot, and about a week prior I was able to do it, but now I was having a hard time. And I realized again that being consistent was really important and not being consistently bad at it. But finally, after dropping my bike a final time, I was done with my circles that we needed to do and I could finally head home. And somewhere in all that madness, I'm not sure where, they at least got one cool photo. So luckily I guess it wasn't all for nothing. But yeah, it was finally the long-awaited end of day 2 and I started heading back to camp, and we could finally rest knowing that we won't be woken up again, as this was our last night here as part of the competition. At this point it was about around 4:30 in the morning and all of the riders were extremely tired, and I mean some of them still had to do their exercises. I was among the last ones to do it, but there were still a couple of riders that also had to finish. But luckily I got back to my tent and I had a good night's rest. There were a couple of really cool shots that were taken here as well. And yeah, so that was it for the second day of the 2021 GS Trophy Qualifier. I had a really good time editing and I also had a good time riding, and thanks for watching if you made it all the way till the end.